Welcome boys and girls, Costin here with my cast dwarf unit tier list for Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires campaigns. And it is important to note that with cast dwarves, you have labor units and hobgoblin units that you can recruit en masse, no restrictions whatsoever, and it's very easy to get the recruitment structure for hobgoblins. But then everything else is dealing with unit caps, and that does limit how useful some units are going to be compared to others, because it's not just a question of like, oh, this unit is slightly better than another because of a weapon variant, for instance. No, if you recruit a certain variant, you're affecting the unit caps you have available, and those unit caps are the main limiting factor in the Castorf campaign. Then, of course, you do have the Hellforge upgrades, but the problem with that is it's only really worthwhile to get into the Hellforge upgrades later on, because it will affect your armament production if you start going full on there. And that is a problem. It's much better to get a lot of armaments, use those armaments to increase unit capacity. You can have a lot of armies, and by the time you start talking about Hellforge upgrades, you're already dominant on the campaign map. At that point, you're playing to get power to add more power in your campaign. And yes, they can make units absolutely ridiculous, but I'm not really going to consider those upgrades, because by the time you get them, they're pretty redundant. Besides, the cast dwarf units are already fairly strong on a baseline level. It's just the unit capacity limits them. I feel Creative Assembly could have done better with the resource system, in terms of the fact that early on you're very limited by it, but then you just have so much of them that you don't care about it. Anyway, starting with Goblin Laborers, definitely an F tier unit. The benefits of this unit is that they're very cheap, not particularly tall, so that can be useful in some range situation when you're dealing with range fire from gunpowder units. But honestly, as a meat wall unit, they're not worth it in any way, shape, or form. They're worse than Goblin Spearmen. There's only two reasons you would ever recruit Goblin Laborers in a cast dwarf campaign. One is that you may want to recruit a very, very cheap army, and then raids are negotiations are to just cheese laborers. The other one is if you really want to have an additional army to support your main army, which can be important when you're dealing with, say, vampire counts, or more realistically, Skaven, so that they don't overwhelm you in numbers. But that's really it when we're talking about the value of goblin laborers. But even then, you have orc laborers that are just better. Yes, not great, far from it, and one could argue F tier, but they can be recruited from every single settlement. You don't need a barracks, you're not requiring building slots. And look, if you, say, find a battle deep in enemy territory and you've just conquered it, and you may want to focus it on an economy, getting some orc laborers to fill up an army is not necessarily the worst choice in the world. They're the worst orc units in the game, but they are widely available for cast dwarves without the requirement of a barracks. On the flip side, you can get the barracks very damn quickly because you have instant construction in a cast dwarf campaign, but it does cost laborers, but it's pretty cheap. Still, I'm just gonna put these guys in D tier. I would say that you do have a reason that you do have a reason to recruit them, even if that reason is just limited to, if you literally don't have a hobgoblin barracks, you could recruit these guys, and they're not the worst thing in the world to recruit. Then we have the hobgoblin infantry units. So we have cutthroats, sneaky gits, and archers. So archers, let's start with those guys. I'm going to leave archers in C tier, and my perspective on it is they're okay, but they're not phenomenal. They are the one range unit you can master relatively cheap. They can get the job done. They're not useless, but they're not particularly great either in terms of dealing damage. And the problem you're going to encounter in cast dwarf campaign is you're dealing with people like Grimgor, and now more realistically Bashiva. You've got Imric, you've got the dwarves. A lot of people around you hate you. So dwarves hate you to the west, Grimgor hates you to the east. Bashiva doesn't like you, far from it. And all of those are problems that either have significant numbers or a lot of armor. So that's kind of the problem with Hobgoblin archers. And also a similar problem with Cutthroats, because Cutthroats, they're not really a great line holding unit. They're not going to take a lot of damage. Their stats are not phenomenal. But then you have Sneaky Gits. And Sneaky Gits, from my view, are the one unit out of Hobgoblins that can be useful for longer periods of time. Partly because you can recruit an unlimited number of them, but also you have poison attacks, you have dual wield capability, you do have a precursor attack on them. So they do provide damage dealing capability, and while one can argue they're not as durable as the Cutthroats, I would say that's not really worth all that much. And really, the durability of Cutthroats is not that much greater. It's marginal difference. Whereas the damage increase in the combat usefulness of Sneaky Gits is significantly higher. These are the equivalent of Nasty Skulkers for Cast Dwarves. They're not as good as Nasty Skulkers, for the record. Different skill lines that you do have available. Also, Nasty Skulkers are just ridiculous with their armor-piercing weapon damage. But all the same, they do provide benefit. Then we have Wolf Riders. So, Wolf Riders with spears, bows. So, the spear version, I would say it's a useless unit. It is a light cav unit that's supposed to act as shock cavalry, close the gap, dealing with enemy range units, cavalry, all that, but they don't do enough damage, they don't have enough durability. Yes, they're fast, but that's about it. Wolf Riders in general are fairly lackluster units in the game. Then you have the bow version. Now, the bow version is a better unit because, like with other skirmisher cav units in the game, you may be in situations where you want to peel off a certain portion of the enemy army, and since realistically dealing with Skaven or Gorst or Greenskins, you would probably be fighting a lot of battles outnumbered. Having a unit that can run around the battlefield taking pot shots, getting enemy units to follow it, is an incredibly useful skill. Also, you may want to fight in defensive positions as Cast Dwarves, so having a unit that can go and lure the enemy if they're not looking to attack you can be incredibly useful in a campaign. Then we have Hobgoblin Bow Throwers. Now, a lot of people laugh at bow thrower. So they laugh at the greenskin version of the bow thrower. They certainly laugh at the dwarf version of the bow thrower. And they figure that because cast dwarves have such awesome artillery that hobgoblin bow throwers are useless. They are definitely useless later on in a campaign. But then again, later on, like, are we going to rank the cast dwarves based on the idea you can just fill their entire armies with Deathshriek missile launchers and magma cannons and hell cannons, or are we going to rank them based on the idea of limitations of unit caps that persist for a long period in a campaign when it actually is relevant? Personally, I go with the idea of ranking units based on the relevant portions of a campaign, not so much when you've already become so dominant you don't care. Like, it's always weird when people talk about, like, oh, this unit is great. Okay, but by the time you can get, say, a tier 4 unit, realistically, in a lot of campaigns, you should be dominating so much of the campaign map that it really doesn't matter. Unless you're talking about certain races where getting to tier 4 is not really an issue as much as others, or where getting to tier 4 as a structure, as a building, is not necessarily viable, but getting tier 4 units is. Looking at you, cast warriors. Regardless, bow throwers, they are a massed artillery unit. They're not a single entity. They're useful in sieges against enemy artillery. Like, if you just want, like, other cast dwarf artillery, when you look at it, and I do mean all of it except hell cannons, really, and to some extent magma cannons, They're great for field battles, amazingly so. They're not great in artillery duels, though that's not necessarily a big issue when dealing with the AI. But one of the things that can be a bit of an issue is, single entity sieges. A siege situation might be not the most ideal. You have more entities per the unit, and the way bolt throwers work, and also you can apply this to the high elves and their artillery, and dark elves as well, it's more sustained damage. So if you're looking for a big burst of damage, not so much, but if you're looking for a sustained damage dealing capability, can be useful. Not as vulnerable as the single entities can be in some situations, and especially useful, and can be more useful in sieges than anything else. Basically, it's an easy to get artillery unit that you can mass without limitations, which removes a lot of the pressure in terms of okay, I need to have artillery in every army for the sake of freaking sieges. Well, with this unit, you get that flexibility for the sake of siegecraft without having to make that decision. I guess you should still get artillery, don't get me wrong on that subject. Also, getting cast dwarf artillery can be annoying because of armaments, tower requirements, so that's another benefit with Hobgoblin bolt throwers. Then we have Kadai, fireborn. So I'm going to put this in B tier. I know it may seem like heresy putting this unit in the same tier as freaking Sneaky Gets and bolt throwers, but here's the thing. As a unit, it can be both fantastic and really crap at the same time, I should add. So when their leadership is high, they're amazing. They do a lot of damage, survive a lot of damage, just really can hold the line on their own. But then their leadership goes down and they disintegrate in an instant. So they're kind of squishy, even though on a surface level they might not seem so. But basically, you lose that leadership situation, you lose the unit, and you end up suffering significant casualties to this specific unit. You can heal it. You have benefits for Kadai units, for magic, but at the same time, it is that sacrifice. So I feel like I never fully utilize them the way that I like to. If it wasn't for that disintegration aspect, they'd definitely be a freaking S tier unit. But unfortunately, you do have that limitation, that kind of balancing aspect that Creative Assembly went for. Next up, we have Bolt Centaur. So you have renders with great weapons. Well, okay, so with axe and shield, dual wield, and great weapons. Let's break it down. The baseline version, I'm even going to say it's an F tier unit. It's never really worth recruiting this unit with shield. Because bull centaurs in general are very durable units inherently, so the shield is kind of redundant. It might not be something you would say about the cavalry of other races having range protection, but when you have to make the decision of, do I get X version of unit, and you're looking at your unit caps, you're looking at the unit cap situation, limited armament situation, this is the least useful version of the bull centaurs. Then you have dual weapons and great weapons. So dual weapons, I put in B tier. Again, you have limited armaments, you have limited capacity, you have to make a decision. And it's not just a decision between the variants, it's also a decision between this unit and other units as well. So the dual weapon version is really good at dealing with chaff, but it's not necessarily the unit you want to invest in the most long term. It is useful to get them, definitely, especially in the early game, but later on you might just want to replace them with a great weapon version, which is absolutely an S tier unit. It's one of the best cav units in the game in terms of dealing with other cavalry. It's not really great as a regular cav unit in the sense of shock cavalry capability. That is one of the problems you will face when using bull centaurs. You don't have the speed, you don't have the shock capability, but in terms of a capable cavalry unit, monstrous cavalry unit that can go into a melee situation and more often than not win, bull centaurs with great weapons basically hold their own against vast majority of units. They'll defeat the vast majority of cavalry units in the game. They'll defeat most infantry units in the game. You do lack speed to make them useful in terms of shock, in terms of chasing down range units effectively, or, closing the gap with artillery before artillery does a lot of damage to your front line. But we're saying, like, just pure combat capability is like, yeah, these guys are freaking amazing. Okay, then we have Death Shrieker missile launchers. I'm going to say they're an A-tier unit. I wouldn't quite say they're an S-tier unit. On one hand, they can do a lot of damage. They can be useful in both sieges and field battles. Like, they can do AoE or they can do single target. Though using single target against, against actual single entities is a bit of a questionable discussion. But they're more useful at dealing with clumps of enemies. And then, of course, there's the benefit of their firing arc. So basically, these are the equivalent of Hellstorm rocket batteries for the Chaos Dwarves. And kind of funny enough, while you do have the unit cap limitation, you can also recruit these guys earlier, much earlier, depending on how you play the situation with regards to materials. You can recruit these guys much earlier than Hellstorm rocket batteries. Again, depends on how you play that around. I won't quite put it in S tier. I think there's some things with regards to its combat capability that might leave a bit to be desired, like especially sometimes getting the damn thing to fire, but at the same time, when it does hit an enemy, damn, do they feel it. Then we have magma cannons. So magma cannons do a single shot, but it does do a fair amount of damage. Keep in mind, these artillery units, you're looking at shared unit caps. I would say they're less useful than Death Shriekers, though they're pretty easy to get. Realistically, you're probably going to get a magma cannon as one of your first artillery pieces in a campaign. Do they have long-term staying power? Not necessarily so. Like, later on, you would probably want to replace them, whereas Death Shriekers kind of useful throughout the course of your campaign, from my perspective. But still, as an early game artillery, it's pretty solid, but the problem is, of course, the unit cap situation. Like, if not for unit caps, I would rank it higher, but when you do have those unit caps armament situation, yeah, you don't want to necessarily use it on some things as much as others. This brings us to Iron Demons. Like, Iron Demons, kind of useful as a chariot, a very big, durable chariot, ranged one that can be really useful at slowing down the enemy in a fight. Not necessarily great in melee, but they do have both ranged and melee capability. Not the best unit in melee. You certainly don't want it in a prolonged melee engagement. But similarly, it is just a useful unit sometimes to use. Like, it's lower priority than, I would say, the magma cannons, Death Shriekers, but definitely a unit that has value in combat for the Chaos Dwarves. Unlike Skullcrackers, who I would say are an F tier unit. Like, let me put it like this. You get a bit more melee capability than Iron Demon, but it's pure melee. And surprisingly, Skullcrackers can be incredibly vulnerable in a melee fight, which kind of defeats the purpose of the unit. Like, I know the trailer showed them, like, oh, breaking down gates and all that. Like, let me put it like this. There's plenty of ways of breaking down gates as Chaos Dwarves. So Skullcrackers in a field battle, not really that great. In a siege, given the fact that if you allow this unit to be surrounded by many different enemy types, you are likely to lose it, then yeah, it's not an ideal unit, and definitely not worth using your unit capacity on. Then we have Hell Cannons. So Hell Cannons S tier unit, what do you want me to say? It's high damage. It's a high damage artillery that doesn't share a unit cap with other stuff. And that's actually useful because it means the cost increases are separate compared to other units. Like, with other units, other artillery units, you might have to worry, like, okay, I increased the unit cap a bit. But then, the cost goes up. Hell cannons being separate is an advantage. They're just strong units. Like, they've always been strong artillery units. I remember even back when Warhammer 1 came out, how terrified I was of fighting hell cannons. It was actually the only one unit that I was genuinely terrified of dealing. And even nowadays, really, when the AI controls hell cannons, like, you feel it. Because this thing, yeah, hits on a wide arc, hits from a long distance, does a lot of damage, just a very damn scary thing to deal with. Also, it has a crew, so that actually is a benefit in terms of its survivability in a battle situation, which is also annoying when dealing with hell cannons, because you have to defeat every single entity of its damn crew. Then we have Dreadquakes. Like, look, I get it. In terms of pure combat ability, I would say definitely S tier or S tier plus. But a couple of things here to mention. Tier requirements, armament requirements. Like, you're gonna need so many materials to make it work. And then in order to increase capacity, you're looking at so many armaments. So with Dreadquakes, yes, very freaking strong unit. Absolutely. If it does damage. Very freaking slow. Undeniably, a very, very powerful artillery unit. Probably the single best artillery unit in the game individually. But between tier requirements and limitations on recruitment, not quite S tier. Like, if it was easier to access, but getting to high-level towers can be genuinely frustrating. And when you do get them, again, you've kind of won. Anyway, you then have Kadai Destroyers. So, Kadai Destroyers, pure combat capability, it's hard to argue against Kadai Destroyers. I like Fireborn. Like, Fireborn can have their issues. Kadai Destroyers technically have the same issue, but they're so damn durable, inherently speaking, that they can hold off an entire army on their own. Like, you send the Kadai Destroyer into an enemy army, and then you can ignore that entire section of the battlefield, win or lose, and realistically you're not gonna lose most of the time. You know it will be just fine. And if you're losing because of other parts of the battlefield. So, yeah, definitely a great unit, but again, tier requirements, recruitment limits, etc. Great unit, though. Don't get me wrong. Then we have Taurus. So, regular Taurus. It's kind of a weird thing to talk about Taurus. Like, it's very easily accessible as a unit. It's incredibly useful early on in a campaign. Like, just play an Astrogoth campaign, and play around with one of these early on, and you'll see how very damn useful this thing can be, like against Grimgor and other foes. Is it a unit that you want to invest in long term? No, because you have Bale Taurus, which Bale Taurus is just basically your regular Taurus, which is just better. Yes, tier requirements and so on, but flying capability plus its sheer combat stats, like, you get the flexibility of flying in it. It's not so high tier that it becomes an issue. And it's just an incredible addition to a roster. One of the things I would mention about Kadai Destroyers, it's a ground-based unit that does a lot of damage. Well, we got plenty of those. But you have a flying unit over Hero Bale Taurus that's just... Honestly, it's ridiculous. Like, both Taurus units are pretty damn ridiculous. Lamassu, I'm gonna put it in... Honestly, I'll even go so far as to say D tier. Is it a bad unit? Not so much. Is it worth really recruiting? Not so much. That's kind of my perspective of the Lamassu. Yes, I know it has some buffs, debuffs that you can use, but let me just say it like this. If I were to get a flying unit, I'd rather get a regular Taurus or a Bale Taurus. And even as a mount option, that definitely applies as well. Like, Lamassus can be okay, but yeah, it's not phenomenal. It's certainly not worth using the resources in order to increase unit capacity in a campaign. Realistically, you're probably just going to have one in a campaign, and that's going to be it. The one you inherently have. Then we have blunderbusses. So blunderbusses, I'm going to put B tier. Okay. So on one hand, if these guys hit with their ranged weapons, they do significant amounts of damage, and that cannot be underestimated. On the flip side, you have the downsides of limited range and firing arcs that can be a problem. So more often than not with blunderbusses, it's kind of a hassle to get them engaged in a combat situation where they will actually fire at an enemy, because there's a lot of things that are working against them. Again, if they can shoot at an enemy, a lot of those enemies are going to disappear, if we're talking about infantry specifically. But it is the question, are you actually going to get them to fire? So is that trade-off with this unit. But then we have Infernal Guard with Gunpowder units. Oh, do I love these guys. In fact, I would even put I think I would put them S tier, just because incredibly useful range unit, high level of damage, high level of durability, pretty decent melee capability as well. By the way, that's one of the benefits of both Blunderbuss and Infernal Guard with Fireglaves, is that they do have pretty decent melee capability. Not the best, but they'll get some job done. It's kind of funny, Fireglaves are as close as you're going to get to having a halberd unit in a Chaos Dwarf campaign, which, yeah, I know it's silly to think of them like that, but all the same, you do have pretty solid melee capability and very good range capability, long range, high level of damage, sustainability, and they don't have the same issues, from my experience at least, in terms of actually getting shots off as blunderbusses. The way I would view these guys, they're more useful at dealing with lords and single entities or fewer entities. These guys are more useful at dealing with clumps of foes. But yeah, suffice to say, Fireglaves are just gonna get a lot of things done. Then we have Cast Dwarf Warriors. So Cast Dwarf Warriors, A tier unit, very durable, pretty good level of damage, very easy to acquire in the campaign, absolutely worth recruiting. And these guys are your front line. In fact, you don't even want the Great Weapon version. The Great Weapon version is not worth the investment, like the share unit capacity and all that. So when you're looking at units to recruit, like Dwarf Warriors will Cast Dwarf Warriors with Great Weapons, yes, they're strong, durable, etc. But the shielded version is just going to be better. They're going to hold the line more effectively, and even against heavily armored races like Dwarves, I'd rather build an army with a bunch of regular Cast Dwarf Warriors than with Great Weapons, because you do have the range consideration to take into account, and line holding capability is always useful. Like, if it wasn't the discussion of limited units, yeah, I would probably rank them something like this. But when you do have that limitation, it does hurt, admittedly. Then we have Infernal Guard, and Infernal Guard with Great Weapons. So, yeah, pretty much the same stuff. And I'm going to rank them in a similar fashion. So they're, in effect, the same unit, just better. It's kind of like Cast Warriors in Chosen situation. You have a unit that's more durable, bit higher tier, but offers the same combat capability. So Great Weapon and shielded version, same situation. Like, eventually you just probably will recruit a lot of Infernal Guard, regular Infernal Guard eventually, with Cast Dwarf Warriors just being a backup if you get to a point of ridiculous unit capacity increases. Then we have Infernal Ironsworn. And this is basically an Infernal Guard unit with the shield, but also a grenade attack. So just a bit more useful. The single best infantry unit you have, and definitely one of the better infantry units, or one of the best infantry units in the game. Shame you have, like, this is actually a situation where I like a Great Weapon version, because that would be the single best infantry in the game. Well, maybe not Wrathmongers, or the Slaaneshi infantry units, the high-end Slaaneshi infantry unit, but still, it would definitely compete with those units. As it were, it doesn't quite reach that level, but still phenomenal in a campaign. To get these guys, very, very useful. very powerful. And that is about it, ladies and gentlemen. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.